Well, I think we just hit back. So if you want to just repeat that, and then if it ends up being duplicated, I'll just cut it from the recording. But yeah, we talked about Cradle before the conversation. Anything you want to add?
Um, Let me see. I'm still not seeing the stream pop up. It says that you are offline, but it also says that you're live. Strange. Um,
All right. Does it say we're good? I sent messages over there
we're
to
good now.
Aku.
We're good,
Okay,
yeah.
cool. Yeah, so we were talking about, sorry for the welcome back, everyone. So we talked about Gaea's Cradle, and I've played a lot of it, but you had some thoughts on it beforehand. And if I could bother you to repeat them, that would be appreciated.
Yeah. Cradle is too good at what it's doing. It's already in the color that's doing that exact thing. It's
Yes.
just like it shouldn't even be an optimized list, in my opinion. It's
Okay.
just something that individually will take over the game, and it's the hardest thing to remove in Commander. It's just a
Yes.
land. Not many people are doing that at all.
Also,
If
creatures are
Cradle were
pretty easy.
legal, mhm.
Creatures are pretty easy. Like, we're going to get Serra's Sanctum here later. That's about enchantments, but creatures are just so ubiquitous. And I'm going to add to your point about green's already doing the thing. I don't think green is the strongest color in Commander. I don't even think green is the strongest color outside of CEDH. But the line I came up with, I think it's a pretty good one, says that green is the strongest color that people are okay losing to. And what that means
Yeah.
is you can't let wild cradles, even proxy cradles, just be out in the wild doing their thing. Like, it's way too good. If
Mhm.
you've ever seen like a Risk the Redeemed that allowed them to proxy a cradle, like you just know you can't let that exist in the wild. It's really bad.
Yeah. Individually, just way too strong of a card.
Yep.
When you consider, literally just its color, it's then just way stronger, and there's
Yes.
so many strategies that take advantage of that, even if they're not trying to take advantage of it. On a lower level, you're just going to be playing a lot of creatures.
Aku asks if we could review their bracket 3 deck in the break or at the end. I don't know how much time you've got, Zen. I'll let you be the.
I do have plenty right now, so
Okay.
we'll see how
Sick.
it goes.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
may be around for that, yeah.
Okay, so we have Glacial Chasm. Now, here's the
Take
thing.
it off.
I want to make a joke about Glacial Chasm. So people used to say that Commander didn't have a ban list. It was just Sheldon Menery's friend group's ban list. And now that's what Commander players have to deal with. I feel like Glacial Chasm is just the Commander Clash group's ban list, right? Like that's what it feels like to me. And I understand why, right? Cumulative upkeep. For anyone who's like, oh, but the cumulative upkeep is so bad. Well, there's two things here. One, you can just add it back to your hand, so you don't have to pay that much over and over. And then the fact that you cannot attack and all damage dealt to you is reduced to 0, that doesn't exist as a thing once you
Yeah,
get. Now, I think you actually have to ban it at upgraded. I think I disagree with you because there are decks who have no game plan other than damage, and they instantly lose to Glacial Chasm. And before you say, I'm not saying you would say this, but before anyone else out there is like, why don't you just play Wasteland or Strip Mine or something like that? Just get rid of it and it's fine. Yeah, do you have 3 of those in your deck in case everyone is playing one? I don't think you do, actually. So, where do you sit? I heard you say get rid of it. Does any of this sound convincing to you?
I mean, I guess it's a very particular set of deck building that is going to have you winning the game with Glacial Chasm.
Sure.
Um, and it's just something that I don't think you find at the lower levels. If it's at the higher levels, it's still not a great strategy compared to so many other things.
Rather than
Um,
it's not, well, I'm not looking at it in a does it show up and does it happen in the wild? I'm looking at it more as in like we have to be responsible and put the girders on so that you were talking about the player knowledge pool. I don't want
yeah.
some Omnath player or some like Yarok is a better example, right?
Mhm.
Like some Yarok player to find out about Glacial Chasm, and then you have to explain to people who are like, gee willikers, I just updated my deck with $100. Yeah, man, I'm sorry, you instantly lose because of Glacial Chasm.
Mhm.
Because you didn't know that card existed, but it actually turbo stomps you, and there's nothing you can do about it. Like,
Yeah, like I mean, do we consider Azusa's or an Orb, Crucible and Glacial Chasm to be like a combo that you're not supposed to play at lower tiers?
It's hard
I
because
don't know.
it says no 2-card combos, and that is explicitly not a 2-card combo. Like it tends to be
Yeah.
like the reaccrual of secondary effects over and over, but
Hmm.
it's not as hard to do as you think it is. I'm not saying that you, but like generally, if people aren't worried about it, the biggest reason I haven't seen
Yeah.
Glacial Chasm in a lot of my stores and a lot of the places I've been, a lot of the play groups I've been part of, is that they don't know it exists, right?
Hmm.
Like they just don't
It's
know
just
about
something
it.
that I've literally never seen played in a game of Commander.
Okay,
It
it fe-
like you
feels like that
specifically
knowledge
put
thing.
cards in your deck to make it work. Um,
Yeah,
yeah, and it like I've considered building a deck like Azusa or something like that, and
sure.
Glacial Chasm being a plan, just because I like land shenanigans. I have played Naya Dark Depths, and I like love that kind of deck.
Yes,
It's like it's my kind of thing, and at the same time, like maybe I just haven't seen how much of a feel bad it is compared to like Drannith Magistrate or something
sure.
like that. You know, if it goes unanswered, that game's gonna go long. That game's gonna be hell. It's not gonna be a good time for anybody.
Yeah,
I can see where that would happen. So
I'm actually
I
go-
I can totally understand, even with my opinion being like, yeah, we can just get rid of this.
yes.
I totally understand the point to have it at a higher thing, and I would not be mad at it being at a higher thing.
I'll put it
Despite
this
my
way:
very passionate, get it out of here.
if every Magic player who played Commander knew about Soul Ring, Arcane Signet, and Glacial Chasm, then my opinion would be we have to keep it where it is now. Whereas I think your opinion is more, if I'm tell me if I've got this right or wrong, your opinion seems to be more, yeah, but no one knows about Glacial Chasm, so it's totally fine. Or like maybe some people know about it, but they might not have the skill or it's not that
Mhm.
good a threat. Like I look more
It
at
takes a lot for it to overrun a game.
okay.
And maybe I think I just underrate the ability of these lower decks to actually win past it, or I overrate their ability to win past it.
Yeah, most people are
Um
that's because I'm over here doing like devoted druid and Riel Everwise and like this stupid nonsense, and some of the other people that I know we've played with do that. I think a lot of like food chain is pretty common. I think a lot of people don't know about this. I can think of at least a couple places where I know they don't know about this card. So it's more like
mhm.
being a shepherd. I don't think you can let this out in the wild. Not least because it's on.
Yeah.
I joke, but not least, Zan, because it's on the Commander Clash podcasts, like their personal ban list, which means that there's a not small number of people from that influencer group, right, from that YouTube channel, who know what it is and would do stuff with it regardless, right?
Yes.
So, uh, all right. Grand Arbiter Augustin the Fourth, the poster child of stacks, at least in common parlance. What do you think of Mr. Arbiter?
I think
Go
that
on.
you can definitely get rid of it.
Okay, I 100% agree. Like, that's going to sound
Yeah.
crazy, but I 100% agree. If you think that this is a problem, then I would suggest you there's cards that aren't on this list that I think are covered by that bracket restriction against, like, again, if we, you're going to see my eyes glow up as I go over here. No mass land denial or extra turns. It's just banned in bracket 1. No mass land denial is just banned in bracket 2. It's just banned in bracket 3, right?
Mhm.
And like, what are you using Grand Arbiter Augustine the Fourth for if you're not putting like Static Orb, Winter Orb, Defense Grid, like,
Yeah.
you know
And
what I?
I don't think people in tier 1 are arguing that their deck is a stacks theme deck. No,
No,
like
dude,
that
maybe
that's
it's
just
like a
not something
judge
that's
tribal or
happening.
something. I actually think
That's
just
one of
remove
those like
this.
very bad face things that people are just like, yeah, we're just gonna avoid this and not
Well,
play with that person if they want to call that a theme deck, because
yeah.
it's just not. It's a very real strategy.
Also, you play Storm. Is blue white the Storm colors that you're looking at? Like,
No,
are you,
I'm not, like
no, absolutely not, dude.
yeah.
Like, here's the thing: if this belongs in the same place as someone like winning with braids, like the braids that
Mhm.
kill, like the braids that kills you. You know what I mean? Like, okay,
Yeah, the 3-drop one.
I guess you're sick then. Yeah, just remove this from the game changers list. I have seen no example of Grand Arbiter or Augustine II that isn't doing stacks and was any good ever. Like, period. Zero times have I seen it actually be good or interesting or anything. Like, Aku in the chat even says, I used to run that card in my blue-white deck, and I took it out because it did not perform. You wouldn't even play this in, like, Drago, right? Drago,
Yeah,
Draga, you know what I mean? It's just so trash, dude. It's so bad, especially if we take them on the commander panel on their face and say brackets 1, 2, and 3. We're keeping that rule about no mass land denial. Like, then all the cards you're worried about for Arbiter are just already gone. So, like, fuck it. It's not even a big deal. I'm gonna say Grim Monolith is our next one. I actually think Grim Monolith is weird, right? Because Grim Monolith, the only reason I think that people are more okay with Grim Monolith than they think they are is because it's an expensive card. If you start letting people play with proxies, the number of people who are just like, oh, but what about Kinnan? No, there's like a million other commanders besides Kinnan where Grim Monolith just does the thing and generates infinite. And again, you don't even mean it to, right? It's just really good.
Amongst artifact things, it's just like, mana positive rocks are just very scary.
Yes. That's why I think like banded out of tier 3, because even if you think that you can deal with it being upgraded, the fact that it can do everything on top of itself is kind of that Bolas's Citadel argument you were saying before. Like, oh, I'm gonna Nature's Claim this. Are you? In response, infinite positive mana. Yeah. Also, it generates so much mana at such relatively low cost because, like you said, it's mana positive, that if we're going to assume that Sol Ring should be on this list, then Grim Monolith should also be on this list. Like,
yeah, and unlike, like Mana Vault.
Unlike Chrome Mox is a good example, because Chrome Mox we actually said should be banned out of tier 2. So why do you think tier 3 for Grim Monolith sounds more appropriate?
What I was saying with the Mana Vault, like, unlike Mana Vault, it's mana positive without having any sort of downside, and it just immediately, like, it's like the timing of it. Chrome Mox giving you 1 extra mana at the time that it gives you 1 extra mana, it just gets you 1 point of mana ahead, period. That's just what happens.
Yes.
Grim Monolith has potential surrounded by other cards to be generating an insane amount of mana every turn.
Yes.
Now it's a pretty picky set of cards. It's not like it's very easy to just say, oh yeah, I'm gonna splash Grim Monolith and Manifold Key and all of these things just
as I discovered, by the way. Yeah. No, you're correct though.
Yeah, it's much it's much worse without those things surrounding it. It's still just explosive.
Yes.
You can just play it turn 2, and then next turn you can just play a 6 mana commander. It's a bit much. It's like it's way too.
The timing. It's the timing, like you said.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just that it comes down at a point where it's all too relevant to have 3 extra mana.
Yes.
If somebody plays a turn 1 Llanowar Elves, I'm not like jaw agape. What are they gonna do next turn?
Yes.
Same with Chrome Mox.
Or even Gemstone Caverns or something like that, right? It's like, oh, okay, well, that's interesting. No,
I'm like, yeah, that happens. You are slightly ahead now.
Yes.
When somebody passes, when they get around the table back to themselves with a Grim Monolith, I'm much more like, are you going to play something that's actually big and scary and can kill us this early?
Yes. I'll even put it in the casual side of it. Even if you don't think you're doing that much crazy, that is actually a Titan of your choice. Right?
Yeah.
And there's a lot of things that make Sun Titan pretty good, actually. Like, it's not CEDH, but like there's a lot of really dumb stuff that you could do with early Titans. And that's not even that's not even the big one, right? There's way scarier stuff. So yeah, I think it just can't be in bracket 3. It's just way too good. Like, you can play it in bracket 4. Because games are supposed to end, right? And that's kind of the consensus of bracket 4, right? But
yeah, and what we've kind of come to with bracket 3 is that the threats are allowed to be good.
Yes.
Like, they're definitely allowed to be good. It's just the speed that you're playing them is a huge consideration.
Yes.
If you're playing, if somebody says that their deck is a 3 because they're playing literally an upgraded precon, they probably still aren't at that point where they want to play against a Grim Monolith.
Yes.
And then watch you slam your 6-mana commander
Yes.
on turn 3.
It's kind of the
there's like no
opposite.
case where somebody wants to see that happen.
It's kind of the opposite of Adnos and Bolas' Citadel, where you could play them for value and they just accidentally generate more value than they think they will. No one's accidentally putting in or is surprised by how much the Grim Monolith performs for them, right?
Yeah, we're not playing Grim
protecting
Monolith to immediately tap it and play 3 Universal Automatons. We're just playing Grim Monolith to play a huge spell.
I need those changelings, man. I need the changelings. Oh, God. Okay, so I'm just going to ask, like, with our next one here, Imperial Seal, right?
Yeah, same as Demonic.
Yep.
Vampiric is the only one that I could see any argument for being higher than Core.
Yep.
Just because it's an instant.
Just because Imp Seal also, I mean, here's the thing, it's not on this list, but like Wishclaw Talisman does more at that level, frankly, than Imperial Seal. Now, I know people are going to be like, that's not true, because I Wishclaw and I get the thing back in response to my... Listen, again, we're not talking about CEDH, calm yourself. We might be, however, for Jeska's Will.
Yeah, Jeska's Will.
Jeska's Will's kind of nuts, actually, because here's the thing: there's 2 Jeska's Wills, right? There's the Jeska's Will that someone draws, and everyone hates it because it's garbage and they're not happy with it. And then there's the person who starts the game with Jeska's Will in their hand, and you just know immediately you're in for an incredibly shit time. And they basically roll a lottery, right? And just say, like, 1 in 13 opening hands, I'm just gonna have 7 mana on turn 1 or 2, right?
Yeah, I don't have too much to say about Jeska's Will other than kind of the same argument for Grim Monolith. It's like, it's the timing of it. It comes down, you slam something that's very strong immediately, and it genuinely will take over the game on its own. It
has some restrictions in the fact that it's mono red, but like, the only question to me is, do you ban it out of bracket 4? Right?
Definitely not. I think that the bracket 4 decks have enough removal to answer whatever comes after the Jeska's Will.
Sure.
They're just not as scared of the Jeska's Will itself,
Sure.
Whereas everything else here has reason to be terrified.
Yeah. It's not Drannith Magistrate where they literally can't handle it. And it's not Gaea's Cradle where it's so explosive and permanent and hard to remove. So I think I agree with you. We have another blue card that, frankly, I don't think should be on this list at all. Jin-Gitaxias Korra Augur, for me, hits the same lines as Expropriate. Oh, but it's a 5/4 with Flash. Once again, dies to Doomblade, right? Not the best argument, but hear me out. At the end of your turn, draw 7, and then each opponent's hand size is reduced. It's 10 mana, guys.
And it's also is this banned here because people are going to put it in the command zone,
Well, I played against those decks, and they literally lost to a $35 Glissa bulk box deck. So, it's not that good, dude.
To what Aku is saying as well in the chat about, Narset and Puzzle Box or anything similar to that.
Yes.
The fact that Jin-Gitaxias is here, and I believe Notion Thief is not.
Yes.
There's just...
Oh, we're going to make that list.
In the command zone. It is in the command. You are ready. You know what's happening.
It's like Nekusar, guys. Everyone knows what a Nekusar means in the command zone, right? If you read Jin-Gitaxias in the command zone, you know there's going to be hey, guys, the game is, don't let them play Jin-Gitaxias, because if they do, we probably immediately lose the game, right?
Yeah. Consider that then they're probably waiting until they have 12 to 13 mana to cast Jin-Gitaxias so they can protect it with a counter spell.
Yes.
There's going to be so much they've already missed in this game. They're going to be almost entirely out of it by the time that it happens.
Now, I actually you made me think of an excellent point for not removing it, but actually from banning it from exhibition. Because if you're the other 3 players at the table, it doesn't matter what level of play you say you're sitting down to. If I sit down on the most casual day of my life, drinking summer lemonade, rolling in my rocking chair right outside my front porch in the southeastern wind, looking out over my fields, and I see Jin-Gitaxias, immediately I'm going to knock that player out of the game. Like I don't think there can be an exhibition of this, not for power level reasons, but because the second I see a bracket 5 deck or a bracket 1 deck, oh, it's an exhibition deck, guys. Bro, if it's Jin-Gitaxias, I'm swinging on you until you die because I don't want that to be there. I actually think that makes it impossible for this to be a bracket 1 deck. Like, does that sound compelling to you at all, or are you just
at the
like,
same
it's
time,
so garbage?
What about our 10 people on Earth who want to build mono blue discard and they have no options other than to play Jin-Gitaxias in the command zone? I think mono blue discard is unique enough to be exclusively an exhibition deck.
Okay, true. But my point is that, though, they'll have, by picking that commander, they're going to have the play experience against anyone with some legacy knowledge or skill of getting immediately turboed out.
To be like, just, it's against the spirit still of that tier 1 to be like, I'm enemy number 1 because I'm showing you such a strong card on its face that, all of you are going to need to deal with me immediately. It's also something where those decks are just mono blue counter spells through and through a lot of the time.
Yeah.
And to that extent, it's true mono blue discard.
Yep.
You cast your spell, and I made you discard it instead.
Hey, they could be a knowledge pool deck that just forgot about Teferi. It's entirely my point only is that it should probably, not for the safety of the other people at the table, but like the protection of the person looking at this list, probably shouldn't have Jin-Gitaxias in bracket 1, because anyone who is like us is just going to say, yeah, just kill that person first, and then we'll have an interesting game. Right? And that's not fun, Yeah.
I think that's fair. It's like, it's in that in-between for me. It could literally go either way.
Yeah.
Like, I
initially thought it should be removed because on the power level, it's just garbage. But you don't want people to have like a really bad time for themselves building this. I got one. I have plenty of hours against. And this is not where I think he goes. This is just where I grabbed him. Kinnan Bonder Prodigy.
Yeah, Kinnan's real good.
Yep. Kinnan's real.
I have a hard time justifying most of these legends being on this list just because I'm like, how much are you disagreeing with the entirety of Commander?
Yeah.
But Kinnan is real good. It, like, he literally existing just gives an example as to why, my
Grim
opinion
Monolith.
on that is irrelevant.
Yeah.
Grim Monolith's right there.
Here's the problem I have with Kinnan, right? Is that I only have this problem because it's Simic. And for whatever reason, we have just decided in the commander space, right, as a group of people, that Simic just gets to be the deck we point to people for. And it makes sense, right? Blue has counter spells. Green has all of the more casual, fun, Timmy facing cards and has big stompies that swing. And then green, blue together tends to have like pure and toothy, like stacking +1/+1 counters, or like a birthing pod style effect, or they're like Tatiova and they just generate infinite card advantage. And the thing is, you know how Nadu, one of its ban explanations was that people would accidentally build Nadu and there was no real fair way to do it? I kind of feel that way with Kinnan. Like, I don't know how you
I think that where he is actually like pretty correct. Like,
4? Yeah.
You should only... What is an optimized Kinnan if not just a CEDH deck? Like,
it's kind of like, we're going to get to Urza. We're going to get to Urza Lord High Artificer, but it's kind of the same idea, that's, I think, on a different scale. We'll get to that shortly, where it's, is Kinnan broken? I don't think he's broken, but there's a reason he's very good in CDH. And actually, I'll just let you know my bias. We didn't talk about this beforehand, anyone, but my thought is, if there is a very dominant CEDH commander, that probably is by definition on the bracket 4 ban list, right? Like, I don't how to pick a good example. Like, if Thrasios Tymna to me should not just be lurking around accidentally doing their thing in bracket 4. We're not going over that right now. I could change my mind, but Kinnan is kind of one of those, right? Like, an optimized Kinnan just is Kinnan. It doesn't scale up from there too high because it's already starting so high. I don't think you want people just, doing this. And that to Aku's point, right? Always focus the Simic deck first. This is just insane. You think this is wrong? Like, Am I missing something here? Is there any real reason to have a bracket for Kinnan? I've never seen one in the wild, I'll tell you.
I really don't think so. It's just too good. If you're playing Kinnan, you're doing one thing in particular.
Yes.
And that is like going to BCH. I can't see many other options for that.
I'll put it this way, right?
Pick a dozen other Simic commanders first.
I don't hate Simic for its own sake, but if you see a Rixbethi Slumbering Isle or a Tatiova, right, or something like that, you don't immediately think that there's 6 cards that accidentally 2-card combo win the game for your opponent without them even realizing it. But I do that for Kinnan. Kinnan needs to go, man. We actually have another one. I'm just gonna. I keep dragging them up here, but I think that is where they go. But maybe it could be lower. Lion's Eye Diamond, right? So I've never. LED kind of has the same problem as Adnaz, where you have to explain to people who've probably been casually playing Magic for quite a while that, oh shit, we're probably going to lose immediately through a very convoluted set of game actions, and I can't help you enough to explain why it's fucking doomed, right?
I still think LED. So this is my true take on this.
Okay.
LED is on here for sins that it itself is literally not capable of committing.
Okay.
LED could be removed because Underworld Breach is already on this list.
Sure.
And it's just
no one brackets 1 to 3 is putting in LED because they either can't afford
somebody
it or they don't know
Tier 1
about
should
it.
be allowed to play LED in their really bad Commander Dredge deck.
Sure. As the worst copy of One with Nothing ever. Right, got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's just that on its own, it's not going to genuinely win somebody the game. It's
You also run into the problem of if LED is banned, then shouldn't, for the same reason of those sins, we also ban Lotus Petal, Yeah. So I'm actually willing to say, this will sound crazy, but I don't think that LED accidentally ends up doing anything. You know how Draenith Magistrate accidentally we're kind of protecting the lower tiers. Kinnan, we're protecting the lower tiers. Gaea's Cradle, you're beating up too much stuff. I don't think anyone's accidentally doing LED, and the people who are more CEDH minded who are Underworld Breach. Well, wait to see what we say about Underworld Breach, okay?
To Rocco's point again with they're printing a lot more things like Underworld Breach.
Yes.
I still think that LED is on the list for the sins of cards. Still like it. And I do agree that we're just protecting the lower tiers from it. Because Emmett Selk probably doesn't do all that. I'm insanely excited for it. It does not need to do all that. Just Yogg-Will type effects are what make LED a very good card.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I cannot see it making an impact in a game of Commander.
Yeah. No one's accidentally jamming LED, and no one is. Very few people are learning without an external resource, just passively what LED does. LED is always doing some dumb thing in the graveyard or with a sack outlet or something like that.
And LED itself, it is a mana ability. You cannot it's not a trigger that you discard your hand. You don't still get to cast cards. It's just you just sack it and discard your hand. That just it's just what happens. So it's either really bad or you are literally just playing it with Yogg-Will effects and getting that much value out of it.
So this is kind of we're not protecting anyone from it, and the people who know about it are going to be placing it in the right spot. I still think that it has to go somewhere, and so it doesn't escape lower, because otherwise, right, if we're using this as a hard removal, a hard get stuff out of here, so that people don't have to have rule 0 conversations, it's more no, here's the actual ban. LED has to be on here somewhere. I know it's eating for the sins of other cards, but surely there's more cards that it works with than there are simplicities and just saying nah, fuck LED actually.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I think that's fine.
Just
Like
3?
I said, protecting the lower tiers.
Yep.
3, that's fine because I already know where I'm putting the other card.
Yeah, you already know where Underworld Breach is going. Okay, so Mana Vault. I'm gonna be honest. Mana Vault is interesting because Mana Vault kind of has that ancient tomb thing going on, where if you're at a lower power level or a lower bracket, the damage is not negligible, right? And then if you're playing at a higher skill level, you're just like, it doesn't untap automatically. You have to pay for it. Like, I actually think this is between Grim Monolith and Ancient Tomb. Not in power level, but in the sense that, hey, should a precon be fighting a Mana Vault? No, probably not. But can an upgraded deck fight a Mana Vault? I'm more tempted to say yes.
I still have to stick with my same argument that I went with for Grim Monolith. It's just too explosive for when it comes down, what it does.
Yes.
It's just, we're now 1 mana shorter because we're assuming that it's played on turn 1. But slamming the 5-cost commander versus the 6-cost commander, how big of a difference is it going to make when it can actually, win the game with what you're casting with that much mana? I really think it's just the same spot.
Just as a sidebar, if Sol Ring were up for debate, would you be putting it in that same tier here? If we get past the emotions of, it's Sol Ring in the face of the format. Well, I know we're not covering cards that aren't on here, but if we were, just because it's interestingly related to it, would you put Sol Ring in the same spot for the same reason?
I would probably have Sol Ring in tier 2. Just because, I feel like the not having anything exist, because I've never been a person who's like, we need to ban Sol Ring.
Yes.
Not having something exist like Sol Ring is probably worse than having nothing like it. It just means that green is better. Because it means that turn 1 Llanowar Elves gets that much better. So all of a sudden everything is skewed.
Got it. Mox Diamond.
Mox Diamond, I think, can be in core. It has a real downside, and it's actually like a hard requirement. It's like, if I open
you can't
up
futz around with
3
not
lands
having a
Mox
land.
Diamond. Yeah.
You just don't. It's the same reason as the Chrome Mox. You just don't want a Mox Diamond randomly coming up against someone's precon. But if someone built their deck to do Mox Diamond things, then that's fine. Okay, that's fair enough. We've covered a lot of that already with Chrome Mox.
Yeah, the rocks are much the same.
Yep. Well, not all rocks are the same, as we can see Mana Vault and Mox Diamond eyeing each other from either side of bracket 2 or 3 ban list. But I get what you're saying. It's not going to go up here, but Mystical Tutor.
Mystical Tutor.
Misty Tutor.
Same argument as Enlightened Tutor. To me, it can just it doesn't need to be in one, but what are you really looking for in any of the others? You're just finding your best card.
Yeah.
I think that's still allowed in precons. Precons have a best card.
Well, instant and sorcery, do you think that that's more or less powerful than artifact or enchantment?
In lower power things, I think that said instants and sorceries are going to be things that have a lot more of an instant impact.
Okay.
But not things that are necessarily stronger by any means.
Sure.
It might just be finding a board wipe. It might just be finding a counter spell. Yeah.
It just kind of goes against the point of exhibition, but you're fine. If they print a precon and it has tutor in it, Mystical Tutor, you're like, Aku in the chat, by the way, says that Mystical Tutor can find other tutors.
Yeah, and just not liking that play pattern.
Yeah.
I think that makes sense sometimes, but it's usually pretty bad to cycle that. It just doesn't feel good to, Mystical Tutor for the Enlightened Tutor to find the Mana Crypt or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
A card that is now banned.
From this list, at least. Yeah, exactly.
It's just not it's not a great thing to do. You're just,
I'm almost tempted to say,
for instance, and sorceries are at, 2 and 3 mana, Merchant Scroll or solve the equation and things like that.
I'm
And
almost tempted to put this in core only because those precons do tend to have like, here is big dumb cast to make the game end and swing in your favor cards, right? Whereas it might be bad to cycle for another tutor. It would be pretty good to go find. I keep using Escape Shift as an example, but there's got to be like something else that you could find that would also be, any of the, I don't know.
I
Like
think that whatever you
Deluge
find,
or
it's
something
gonna
else.
be it's gonna be such a late game card at that level that it still just makes sense for the game to end. You know,
Okay.
if you're casting Mystical Tutor early, what's it gonna grab? It's gonna make a huge difference right now. Mystical Tutor is gonna find things later.
Yeah, it's not finding any of these things that are up here because of the way that the ban list works, right? It's not finding Enlightened Tutor because they're all banned, like down here and below. But if you're at core, it's not finding Psych Rift or Imp Seal or Demonic Tutor. It's not finding your Fierce Guardianship, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, people can search for board wipes. That is true. I don't think that that's something
I would rather
people dislike
search for board wipes
Yeah.
than just have like 6 of them in their deck because they know that every game comes down to combat damage.
Yeah.
And of course those things still can happen. But
yeah, they say valid. Yeah, that makes sense to me. All right, so we're gonna put. Well, I'm just bringing it to the top because it's the only place that doesn't have anyone there yet. Spoiler: I don't think we're gonna put anyone in the CEDH tier, but it could happen. You never know. Opposition Agent. I'm gonna be real with you. The only time Opposition Agent feels bad, if at all, is the exhibit. Okay, it always feels bad, but in terms of like power level or protecting players, it's okay. Like, it scales with the table reasonably well. It's pretty good at checking your game knowledge and your capability. It does hose the Simic players, which frankly I think we need more of. And
Oppo does not take over games
taxing.
unless those games are already very high on this list.
Yeah, and even when it does, it's like, oh, that's an interesting and skill expressive way for it to happen. Like, I don't think Opposition Agent is like a fantastic card to teach people about Commander. I don't think it should be on the list. I know people are like, oh, it induces a lot of salt. You know how you get rid of salt? Add more water, then the concentration of salt won't be as high, like.
I think that's just a core and below card. The cards that people are playing and on a precon level that are searching their deck are not cards that are going to instantly win them the game and like just completely destroy them with an opposition agent.
Yes.
But what Augur just said, it's specific enough to be a good interaction. Like it's very true. It's just gonna get cast on a fetch land or something.
Yes.
Amongst lower power, but the times that it doesn't, it's just genuinely such a feel bad moment. The density of those threats that people are gonna search for is so much lower that it's just genuinely going to ruin the game for whoever it hits. Still, even if it's not going to take over a game, it's just going to wreck one person's day. That's not something that we want to happen.
Also, it's the opposite of Draenith Magistrate because searching is not explicitly a part of the game in the way that having your commander or your whole game plan is. And the ability to, you could say like, oh, if people can't out Draenith Magistrate, how could they out Opposition Agent? The access to the commander and the way that people use their commander to either forward their game plan or out other problems on board is that huge. It's actually just that big. So yeah, I agree with that. A Rhystic Study. All right, listen, nuclear take. Just get it out of everything except CEDH. As actually, like, I was watching Playing to Win, and there was a conversation on there. I forget what episode where they just said like, is Rhystic Study the best card in Commander? I don't know if it's the best or the second best. Like, it's so crazy, dude. And it always fucks up the game because it also, how I said expropriate? It's a teaching moment for the table.
Yeah, you're skill checking 3 different people who all might have very different skill levels. They might not understand what's really going to happen if Rhystic does what it's supposed to do.
And expropriate is a one-time thing. I just grab the other 2 players at the table and say, unless you have a Blightsteel Colossus, just give this man or woman whatever they want, and let them only have one extra turn. You can't do that with Rhystic Study. Rhystic Study is like, so I'm not supposed to play the game, and it's like, well, sometimes you do feed the Rhystic Study because you have to have a game plan, or you can't let them win the game, and it's just the 4 is so expensive, and then it's about the selection of what cards you play so that you have the most optimal way through defeating people for the Rhystic Study. Like, it's so good, dude. It should not, because here's the thing too, if you put Rhystic Study low, then you're just saying like, oh, so I should be using my Worldly Tutor to go grab the best card in my deck. It's actually Rhystic Study. Like, it almost every time, it's just the card draw is so good. I even saw some conversations, I won't say where, right, in case people are like, I hate the idea of gatekeeping, but telling me like those places aren't CEDH enough, that if CEDH did have its own ban list, I saw some murmurs of like, yeah, but could we just like get rid of Rhystic Study, please? That would be sick. you know? I'm not going to say ban it from CDH. I'm kind of opposed to that on principle, because also we're going to do this list with all of the banned cards. And that is why I want to make sure that this understanding of like, I don't think anything should be banned from CDH. That will change, like Flash, obviously. Some other cards for the same reason. But what do you think? Like, should it be out of CEDH, Mr. Grixis player? Let me ask the Grixis player.
I would like to say that Rhystic Study is totally fine at all levels of play and has never done anybody wrong in a game of Magic. It's a perfect card.
Thank you, guest player.
It's totally fine auto include.
Yep.
It should be in every blue deck. It just should be at every level.
Yep. And every deck should also be a blue
that some
deck.
People probably really do hold. But I do agree. Rhystic, it's just that it's going to overtake a game even at tier 4. It's still going to ruin it for everyone else. And if they don't have something likewise to compete with it, which is not going to happen nearly as often in that tier 4 as well in
one of the
5.
games I watched, you'll know it because you were there, was Rhystic Study, Mental Misstep. Well, I guess they have infinite card draw now. All right, that's sick.
Yeah.
It's so
of course
good.
Not Mental Misstep, but something else, because Mental Misstep only counters things with CMC.
Oh, my bad. I said Mental Misstep. I was thinking of something. I was thinking of what the hell is the card I was thinking of? Oh, help me here. What did they end up playing in that game? Do you remember?
I do not remember, because now we're talking about misstepping missteps, which reminds me of the Brewback player that I got to play against once.
Got it, sick. But yeah, but anyways, also the fact that it's 3, it's really hard to tell me when I was younger, hey, man, I know Trinket Mage is sick, or whatever the mage is that gets 3, like, gets a thing of 3, right? I know it only gets artifacts, so I was like, man, it'd be so cool if Rhystic Study was something it could get. No. You must never. It's like Mufasa in The Lion King. Everything the light touches is good, clean magic. What about the Rhystic Study? You must never go there, Simba. Like, it's just such a good card. Hey, Fano, how's it going? The general idea, Fano, is that we think these cards should be set to be banned in these brackets, kind of in the Smogon Pokemon style. And so if people see something that's banned there, then the idea would be that everything that is banned on that level is banned from that bracket of play and below it. That's kind of I heard a lot of people talking about what the power level of things should be and banning on brackets in a hardcore way as opposed to using game changers. I thought it was an interesting idea. So Zan and I are talking about it. Serra Sanctum. I'm only putting
Enchantress is fine.
Yeah, I'm only putting it in the CDH category only because like there's nothing else there. It makes it easy to show. We'll move it afterwards. Here's the thing. Is anyone having a bad time against Enchantress decks? Really? Like, what's the Enchantress that draws a card every time you play an enchantment? I can't remember.
Mean all like 5 of them?
Yeah, exactly. Like, they're all like Selesnya, colored things that just gain you life or draw you a card. They do the Tatiova thing, except for enchantments. This is, I think, banned because someone was like, oh no, I'm really scared that we're going to offend people because we had to ban Tolarian community, Tolarian Academy or whatever it is. So we have to do it for enchantments too, bro. Artifacts are so much more powerful than enchantments in this game. Like, this is.
Yeah, I think that Serra Sanctum, it's fine. You probably don't want to even play against it in the upgraded level, though. It's still just like, how insanely, to the point that Serra Sanctum is in your upgraded deck, we're getting a lot closer to the tier 4, to the optimized.
Yes.
Like, you put that effort in.
Well, you also are playing it in green decks. You're putting it in green decks, right? So you're putting in, like, you're at the level where you're looking at Utopia Sprawl, and you're like, this card is ass.
Yeah.
Let me put on a better card of this. Yeah, exactly. And that's where you don't want Serra Sanctum doing stuff where it, like, double and triple. Is it an ups all game changers bracket? Yeah. Oh yeah. Aku's asking about the bracket one deck that Fano made. Maybe we'll take some time. Fano, the idea is that once we're done with this, we'll cut the stream or partition the stream and then open up. And I think Aku made a bracket 3 deck, and we were gonna go over it. If you still have time for that, Zan. Don't know what your availability is. All right. Smothering Tithe. Man,
you have heard me talk about this card so often.
Man, here's the thing. There's two people in the world of Smothering Tithe, and it's hilarious. World 1 of people in Smothering Tithe is that Smothering Tithe is an expensive, bad Magic the Gathering card that barely does anything, and you should just pay the 2, man, and it's not that big a deal because people can't use their mana efficiently anyways. And then there's the other group of people who rightly point out, oh shit, isn't this used in CEDH? Like, don't people just insanely turbo curb stomp people with Smothering Tithe? Are you sure you want, like, not Tevish Zot? What's the Master of Keys? The Esper Master of Keys, or it's not Esper, but you know what I mean. It's not Tevish Zot. That's the black Planeswalker one. I can't remember the.
You're trying to think of, like, Tivit or something.
I said Tivit instead of Tev. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, Tivit. So what do you think of Smothering Tithe? I played this in an Oloro deck. It was sick.
On it,
yeah.
I understand how its potential to take over a game is right in line with some of the things that we've said about cards in the upgraded tier, like Bolas's Citadel and things like that, or even comparable to what we said about Grim Monolith or Mana Vault.
Sure.
If it does what it does even once, the advantage that you get off of that could win a game in just that tier, and that's too good.
It's also way better in Aristocrats than people think it is, because I have seen so many decks that would categorize themselves as bracket 3 using this new system, and they have this and Revel in Riches. And they didn't even mean to do it, but if you're putting this together in your head, right, you just get the idea of someone who is playing Aristocrats and having a good time, and all of a sudden they have 25 treasures because people have to play the game. And
you have too much mana to play with at that level across the entire game. To say, like, I'm going to get this far ahead in that mana.
Yes. You're not getting ahead. You're getting, like, the game is over ahead. It might take a turn or two depending, but the game is completely over. So I am fine with this being, like, you just don't have Smothering Tithe in bracket 3 and below, because also people aren't running good artifact enchantment removal. So Smothering Tithe is going to do what it's doing, right?
Yeah.
It's not going to stop happening, actually. So, survival of the fittest. Bro, no.
Take it off.
Here's the thing. I am tempted to say ban it from CEDH just because I'm tired of green getting infinite love off of this fucking list. Like, did you notice that this list, the Game Changers list, Zan, was a list of things that Esper players should really consider, and an explanation to all the Gruul Stompy players that actually their wart is totally fine and has no good cards whatsoever. Here's the thing about survival of the fittest. If we're going to say that Enlightened and Mystical Tutor are in exhibition, but Demonic Tutor is in and Imperial Seal are in core because they can get anything. Creatures are enough of everything in modern Magic the Gathering for this to also be banned out of core, I think. Like, creatures can do so much more than they used to that getting the restriction on only getting creatures is actually not as big a restriction as most people think. I just don't think you should have a pre-con level game fighting against survival of the fittest. Like, that's kind of dumb, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do actually think for this card, I very similarly think of like what we said about LED. We are protecting and Serra Sanctum. We are protecting a lower level. And to that guard, like or to that regard, I would put it in tier 3.
Oh,
I would say
okay.
that if you're playing it, you know what you're doing.
Okay.
And
you don't want to accidentally.
It doesn't really belong.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I will say, when I play games that are proxy friendly, people do see this card. They know of this card. The big reason this card isn't in more games is that people have to play with their physical cards in most stores, especially if they're running official store events. And so survival of the fittest isn't there because it's survival of the fittest. But as soon as it's like, yeah, proxy friendly, go do what you want, survival of the fittest is a card people know of. It does find its way into the game, and then it always is doing the thing. It always is assembling the creature combo. Very good. Yes. All right, let's go down to one that makes me laugh. Truthfully,
Tergrid. I don't have too much to say other than it's the same as the Jin argument. It's just easier to do. You know.
Yeah. Tergrid. The problem with Tergrid really is 5. First off, it's mono black. Second off, but every time a thing sacrifices, so you have to do something to make something happen. The big problem is that it's just never going to be a fun time for whoever ends up building Tergrid, right? No casual exhibition style game is happening with this. And actually, I don't even think Tergrid's that big a deal for these decks, right? For the pre-con level decks. I know that's heresy, but I don't think it's that big a deal because they're making so many more creatures. Like, creatures get increasingly cut or scrutinized as you go up this list, right? And
Tergrid might work with too many things, like, to really be fine at a pre-con level. Like, that's the one thing that I do think.
Okay. It's not as obviously bad as Jin-Gitaxias either. Like, Jin-Gitaxias is like, it's 10 mana. The game should be allowed to end, and you should know what you're doing. And even our argument, San, was, if you remember, that Jin shouldn't be allowed to do this, only because you're not going to be able to make a casual Jin. You're going to get smacked in the face the entire time. So, maybe Tergrid doesn't go there. Thoracle, baby! All right.
Woo!
Here we go, man. We just change up CEDH and just ask that this to be banned from bracket 5, which is just the same thing as putting it on the ban list. No,
nah.
Here's the thing about Thoracle. Like, just let the game end, man. I've never met anyone playing Merfolk Tribal, right? You know what I mean? I've not met anyone playing Merfolk Tribal who misunderstood what Thassa's Oracle did. You probably don't want this to be in you like in the upgraded tier, but
definitely not. I don't even think that we want it to be an optimized, really.
Yeah, because it's just so many.
When your deck is so optimized that you're playing Thoracle, you are now still going into CDH. Like, are you playing Thoracle for reasons other than just the combos?
You're playing Thoracle because you're playing Thoracle because it wins the game. You might say like, "Oh, I win with Thoracle, but I don't use Demonic Consultation." Yeah, notice what was said. I'm not using Demonic Consultation, but I know of it and could be using it, right? It's just so unbelievably good, and I've never seen an honest use of it. There's no such thing, like I said, as the Merfolk deck or the Wizard deck that's like doing, I'm doing Leveler and Thoracle. No, you're not. Like, you're only doing that if you don't have access to black. And
it's like, even if you say that you're playing mono blue Devotion, is Thoracle in your deck because you want to get enough Devotion that you win the game off of it?
Yeah, that's getting like real. I don't know about that, Chief. Oh boy, oh buddy, oh wow, the One Ring. Here we go. My favorite.
We ban it because I don't like Universes Beyond cards, but
true. Well said. Here's the thing with this. Man, this is gonna sound so whack. The problem with the One Ring what isn't the problem with the One Ring? So it gives you like invincibility for a turn, right? Until your next turn, which is also wild to behold. And then you just get the draws, and then because Commander is a 40 life format, you don't even care. And then if you're playing CDH, you don't care because you just can't, like, what is the cost to this power? It's just a 4 mana rock, dude. Like,
It's also just a colorless
like,
Adnaz that you can play in every deck.
yeah, I feel like if Adnaz is if Adnaz for 3 black at instant that gives you no protection and has deck building restrictions is banned at bracket 3, then absolutely the One Ring, which is 1 mana less, colorless, gives you protection for an entire turn and draws cards, has to be there.
And optimized decks, like, they may still be killing people fast enough that the One Ring is fine and it's not going, like, it still could totally take over a game. I think we're fine with things taking over a game in the optimized level, as long as it's not like, oh yeah, it's just like,
it has to not be a yoke. Like, it has to not be a yoke, right? Like, the Rhystic Study is a yoke around everyone's neck. Thassa's Oracle, I heard someone explain this. I talked to you about it off stream, but for anyone who's watching stream now, if you're playing power level 4, if you're playing bracket 4 and you're playing Yuriko, which we'll get to, don't worry, then you're playing Yuriko because you like ninjas and you're playing, like, you know, the 5 mana ninja that puts things from your hand into the battlefield for Fallen Shinobi, and you're playing like mist ninjas and things like that, and you're building stuff that's really powerful. But if you're playing bracket level 5, if you're playing CEDH, you're playing Thassa's Oracle because you're in blue-black, and that means you're playing Thassa's Oracle, right? So that's a good enough reason to just not let it happen. Also, you don't want to be the person who has to explain to someone that they lose because someone else has cast a 2 mana creature, right? At a more casual table when they're not ready for that. Like, if someone's trying to win off of Impact Tremors, you don't want to explain what Thoracle does. Like, you just don't. It creates a feel bad. Oh boy. Okay. At Pendrell Vale. Here's the thing. This card would be we're gonna treat this card as if it were like 5 cents, right? Is the idea. Like, if it were proxyable everywhere. So with the idea that this is proxyable everywhere, and we're not like, we're not concerned because it's a couple $1,000s, right? Tabernacle can't be allowed. It just cannot be allowed, I think, and upgraded for the same reason as Glacial Chasm, right?
Yeah, I was just thinking that when just deliberating it before, like, earlier today. I think, like, Tabernacle, you're going to have answers to Tabernacle in Optimized, and you're also going to have ways to win the game without creatures in Optimized.
Yes. Consistently
other
across
than that, though,
across
Tabernacle
the board
literally keeps the game from happening in levels below it.
Yeah.
And that's just not okay at all.
No. If Glacial Chasm with deck building restrictions can cause this problem, then Tabernacle 100% causes this problem when all you have to do is play the Tabernacle, right?
Yeah.
Like, I'm almost debating if Tabernacle should just be, like, restricted from Optimized. And the only reason I don't think it should be is, like you're saying, at Optimized, it's very hard to find Optimized, like, bracket 4 decks that have no alternative win con. It's very rare to find a bracket 4 deck that has no combo plan, has no 2-card infinite, has, you know what I mean? Like, that's very unreasonable, I think.
Definitely.
Okay. Trinisphere. Are you ready for my take on Trinisphere?
I'm ready for your take because I'm also pretty cemented on this one, but it's also like one of my favorite Magic cards. So.
Okay, I don't love Trinisphere. I don't like Trinisphere. It shouldn't be on the Game Changers list because it does an Ancient Tomb. It perfectly scales with the environment that it's going into. If you take your really strong bracket 4 deck and you bring it down to a pre-con level game and you cast Trinisphere using your rocks and you go fucking ham and everything is just right there immediately, they're not gonna notice. Like,
all that matters is what you do after the Trinisphere.
Yes, like
the Trinisphere itself.
Yeah,
it only enabled it.
Yes.
and I don't like getting rid of enablers too much.
Yeah. Also,
yeah,
like
you said it
again,
perfectly. It just scales with the level that you're playing at.
if
very
you're
well.
playing in CDH and someone is casting a Trinisphere, you're like, oh, well done. And if you're playing at a pre-con level and someone casts Trinisphere, you look at them, you ask why they're playing such a terrible magic card, and then you go play your Pelucranos and you just stomp them in the face because they have a bad artifact. You know what I mean? Like, it's just not.
Yeah.
I don't even think. I think this card is so perfectly self-selecting that you could just get rid of it. It's just it's like totally fine. It's actually even weaker than Expropriate and Grand Arbiter Augustin, right? Because at least those have like, oh, but maybe we're taking care of it through other cards, or it's a teaching experience.
Those cards are still relevant at like every stage of the game.
Yeah.
Trinisphere genuinely after a certain point is just completely irrelevant.
Yes. Trouble in Pairs. Okay.
Exact same as well, I don't know.
I actually think
I've played with Trouble in Pairs a lot.
Okay. What are your thoughts? You could draw three cards per opponent, right? Per turn.
In my experience, it overperforms every game in a way that doesn't just remind me of Rhystic Study. It makes me feel like it's better. It's crazy.
Yes.
White, though, is just a weaker color.
Yes.
Like it's just not going to follow up with things. I think it's almost the same principle as like Smothering Tithe. It's just going to come down and it's going to do its thing. But I don't know if we can really still agree that it's going to have to go in the same tier as Smothering Tithe.
Yeah,
because
I'm willing to say I just don't
know. The same way that Rhystic Study does.
Yeah, I'm willing to say I don't know enough there because it draws 3, but the higher you get in gameplay, the more that Rhystic is actually drawing those cards more often. And it's like Smothering Tithe is actually better at higher levels because the mana is that much more important and a limiting factor than necessarily the cards you have, and it's not the best in slot for drawing. I feel like it's got to be there with Smothering Tithe. Like, it feels like it's a touch slower and worse than Rhystic Study, and it doesn't scale up as well as the mana of Smothering Tithe, but it's also not the best in slot for doing its thing. You're still jamming it if you've got it, you know?
Yeah.
I just don't want to say it can't be in your optimized list, because here's the other part. White needs card draw. Like,
it is true.
Like, White deserves to have card draw.
Mm-hmm. It's also,
well, it's also
I've kind of lost my train of thought. But
I'll go to Aku's point then while
I've played with it a lot, and I've played with Esper.
Yes.
And Trouble in Pairs is just very consistently just as good as Rhystic for me. People still have to play the game, no matter what. Trouble in Pairs, just as much as Rhystic, capitalizes on people playing the game. There's a bit more space to playing around it. You're not going to get like a crazy turn out of Trouble in Pairs like you could with Rhystic Study.
Okay.
But it's just so consistent. It's like it's still just lingering. It's just giving people a bad experience where you're getting the advantage out of basically just paying 4 mana one time.
Does this mean
and just sitting there?
Is it wrong then to have Trouble in Pairs and Smothering Tithe be in different brackets?
I don't think so. Just because, like what we were saying, it's mana versus card draw. And card draw is just better to me. Card draw is it's way better. The mana gets you ahead in a way that will like end the game, specifically at the tier that it's banned in and below.
And like tier 4 or bracket 4, right? Having big dumb thing is actual, or enough things is part of it.
Yeah,
but Trouble
bracket
in Pairs
4
will
decks
find
are
you the right thing.
Answering it. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, sure, that makes sense. Aku also says Trouble doesn't do anything in bracket 1 because no one double casts. The thing is that
it's very true. But they do attack with creatures.
Yes, and that's kind of the problem there, is that like this is the nicest looking propaganda effect in bracket 1 and 2 that you've ever seen in your life. Right?
Yeah.
You mentioned we were going to talk about it before, so here's your time to shine. Where would you put
Underworld
Breach?
Has genuinely no place in any tier other than CEDH to me.
Yep.
It does too much. It is
It's also not to Aku's point.
Much.
I'm sorry, man. Aku's making a point here that like Breach is the same as LED. I think the point that I would stab back at that is that LED, you were protecting the lower tiers from it. Underworld Breach, you could actually accidentally find, and it will still be crazy. Like you don't even have to be playing like Emery, Lurker of the Lock. You don't have to be playing LED. You could just be doing Underworld Breaches for value that accidentally win
you can just
game.
cast Breach and then cast a couple tutors and win the game. Breach is ridiculous. It's like there's actually, if there's any card here that I think that there is an argument for banning overall, like in CDH, it's only Breach. And I can't really take it to that extreme right now just because I'm like, I'm not very familiar with what's happening in CDH. I doubt that people are cutting Underworld Breach, but I've played a lot with it. I've seen what it's capable of. There is no world where you are playing Breach and it's not a game-changing like turn. If you're casting it just to cast a Preordain from Grave, that's not great. But it just, it's too much on one card.
Yep.
It's also just Yawgmoth's Will, basically. In Commander, it's just a Yawg Will.
Well, it's also, it combines with what we were talking about before about protecting the players at lower brackets as well. Because, again, you don't have, even in a precon, if a precon breaches, it's winning the game that it breaches. Like, if the game has gone to any length, they're going to accidentally do that the ban logic they had for Paradox Engine again. It's going to dirtle its way into winning the game to an overwhelming and suffocating degree. And it's also just that good. Like, if we go back, again, it's been an hour or so since we mentioned it, but if you go back to bracket 4, it says bracket 5 CDH mindset is a key part of the description. It is a high power format with a very competitive and metagame focused mindset. Mindset is a key part of that description. Much of it is how you approach the format and deck building. It's not just no holds barred like you do in bracket 4. Bracket 5 or CDH requires careful planning and care paid into the following and attention to metagame and tournament structure. Like, all of that means that Underworld Breach is just not. There is a metagame consideration.
I would even say that we are still like placing it there to still even protect Tier 4 itself. It's just what people are able to do with Underworld Breach is not something that's appropriate for anything other than a competitive landscape.
Would you believe I played it in Limited? Did you know that in Theros Beyond Death, Underworld Breach was also crazy? It's like a crazy concept. It's actually really
good. It's a 2-mana Yawg Will.
Yeah, it's pretty good, actually. It turns out actually it's pretty good. In Sealed especially. In Sealed is such a ridiculous like nightmare for your opponents. It's great. Here we go. I've actually played against a guy who, I have a story about this one. So Urza High Lord High Artificer. I played against a guy. This is before we had the conversation. This is before the conversation of brackets, before the conversation of power levels. And he just played Urza because he was the guy who liked he had expensive cards, he had expensive rocks, he liked playing blue, he liked doing the effects and the wheeling that Urza dealt, right? And he didn't quite understand what people liked or disliked about it. Right, he just had that challenge, shall we say? So I got to play against this Urza quite a lot, and what's cool about Urza is that there's no wrong way to eat a Reese's. There's no right way to build a fair Urza. There's no fair. It's like Grand Architect on steroids. There's no version of Urza that you're doing that is going to be as remotely fair as you actually think it is.
Yeah. In my case, what I think of is the advantage that Smothering Tithe gets in mana in its tier. It's very much similar with Urza. You're not going to build Urza and not play artifacts.
Yes.
You're just going to play them, and it's going to get you that advantage no matter what you're doing.
Yeah.
And for that reason, like I think it just goes in that tier 3.
Okay.
You can play an optimized deck for Urza, and you can play against an optimized deck.
Yeah, but there's no Tolarian Academy on a stick, says Aku, is the least of your problems. Like, he's also in probably the best color. Like his game plan is so multitudinous and varied as well. He's self-sufficient. Like you just
Yeah.
don't
We have
have the
answers
means.
in optimized, but we do not have answers in upgraded for how strong what he does
Also,
is.
also something is that it will surprise, right? The way that an Urza just pops off. It won't be a surprise to its pilot, but it's very hard to explain to someone. Urza just hit the field. You have to kill that now. And it's not like, oh, one
Yeah.
of these, oh, if they untap, they win commanders. But it very
Mhm.
quickly goes from they have 2 artifacts and an Urza to they have 5 artifacts, a bunch of constructs, and an
Mm.
Urza. And you can't actually push through and punch them out anymore, right?
Yeah.
And they get to durdle for value. Like all the arguments that were used for Golos when it was banned about how accidentally you just wheel and then you start free casting and it goes insane, right? The same thing's happening here for Urza. So I kind of agree. Like,
Mhm.
I'm very much so, Zan, looking forward to when we do a list of like the top, because this is 40 cards, like the top 40 most commonly played commanders or something like that, right? And
Yeah.
seeing where that goes. That won't be right now. This is already going to be long enough. But Vampiric Tutor. So Vampiric Tutor
Mhm.
is kind of nuts because Vampiric Tutor is Imp Seal and Demonic Tutor, except it's faster, but it also puts on top of your library. But because it's an instant, we all know what happens. You wait till the end step of the person behind you, you put it on top of your library, and that's just the card you're going to draw this turn. Uh,
Yeah.
it
I think I mentioned it earlier. Like, I do think like Vamp Tutor is just the strongest out of those three there.
Yeah, out of
Of the black
they're right here
tutors,
on the screen, right?
and it's
Imp
yeah,
Seal, Demonic
it's
Tutor, Vampiric Tutor, right?
it's to the point where it just goes one tier up. It's just like it's capable of doing too much. Searching for any card, Vamp Tutor is instant speed. It's not gonna always find the same thing. It's going to actually find the best thing for the possible moment. Period.
I also love what Aku said when the Edgar Markov player says, "I put it in the deck for theme."
Yep.
Yep. Nope. That's absolutely cursed. Yeah, I'm of the same opinion. Vampiric Tutor instant speed is just really good. Like I already think Wishclaw Talisman is good, and that's slower, right? And so, like you're
Yeah.
saying, like this is even faster than that, and it's always the card you draw. Like, and it's at any time. It's just so, and it's 1 mana. It's just a confluence of insane shit at the same
Yeah.
time. Like you're not grabbing anything fair. You're always gonna, like, for the same reason we're protecting the lower tiers, right? For core to with or exhibition, right? Where we're protecting
Mhm.
them from enlightened tutor and mystical tutoring towards their best thing. Obviously, doing it for your literal best card every time is probably not a play experience that most people are capable of handling. Like their decks might be able to handle that sometime. They won't handle it every time that every player has a vamp tutor. So I'm gonna say
Yeah.
no. All right, baby. Listen, we're gonna
Vorinclex.
Vorinclex, right? Now here's the thing. We have to this is 2 conversations here. So Vorinclex Voice of Hunger has 2 conversations. The first one is the only rule that we changed to do this whole talk, right? This whole conversation was that we wanted the Game Changers list to actually be a hard ban list for each bracket, as opposed to this complex ban of you have like you can have 3, but only in bracket 3, and then you can't have any in 1 or 2, right? We didn't change the rule about land denial. So I'm just going to take a second here and just go back up. You can see my eyes like glitzing out as I'm taking a look at this. For bracket 1, exhibition, bracket 2, core, bracket 3, upgraded, there is explicitly a thing here that says, in all caps, probably bolded, no mass land denial. Right?
Yeah.
Now, I took that initially to mean, we're not gonna cast Armageddon, right?
Mhm.
But if you read what Vorinclex says, where he basically sleeps lands for a turn, that is a denial of resources. So there's 2 ways we can take this. We can take this as that's not land denial, right? And then we can have a conversation about it. If we say that sleeping lands for a turn is land denial, then he automatically goes in the upgraded ban list right? Because there's just no way that he is too. I don't
Yeah.
think he's too powerful for optimized. But by the rules of the bracket system, he actually has to be in the UU ban list and the upgraded ban list. So which side would you take on this?
Vorinclex is a weird case because I think that, again, Vorinclex is honestly on here for the sins of other cards. And
Okay.
Vorinclex comes down, like, if you are hard casting Vorinclex, he's coming down at a time that is appropriate for whatever stage of the game you're at.
Yeah, on the
natural order is more of an
Sure.
issue, you know?
I
but
see.
Vorinclex itself, it's like, I almost believe that these lower tiers, skipping a turn of mana it's not that big of a deal for them. You know, like they might just play a Gigantosaurus.
Yeah. Well, it's also
and just say we're good.
It's also that the Vorinclex gets double his mana, or their mana, right?
Mm-hmm. Like to that regard, I'm like, if Vorinclex is here for the sins of other green cards, it's too many green cards, and it makes a lot of sense for Vorinclex to be here.
Okay.
Kind of amongst like the upgraded crowd, it's like it is a complete takeover when it happens. It just is.
Sure. More or less so than prime time. Are you ready? More or less so that we're not talking about it fully, but like more or less so than prime time.
Less so than prime time, or more so than prime time.
Okay. I think yeah, I'm on that same page.
Prime time's not going to immediately take over the game,
It's also deck building restrictions there, whereas Vorinclex is just kind of an all-in-one package, right? Mm-hmm. Also, Vorinclex has that problem a lot of green cards have, or a lot of Simic cards have, generally, where that's what most people are playing, and you could just say, I'm accidentally putting in good green cards. Oh shit, I didn't mean to put in Vorinclex. I did, but I didn't mean for it to look like this. Because, when I was playing Voja, I could deal with a Vorinclex. Because I have removal and I have other game plans and I can swing and my creatures are big enough and I have Elf Ball and all this other stuff, right? But that was a decidedly bracket 4 deck. I don't know what a game knowledge bracket, game knowledge limited bracket 3 list looks like that can deal with Vorinclex. Right?
Yeah.
Also,
it's very difficult.
Yeah. It's also way harder to deal with Vorinclex than it is like Elish Norn, the one that has Panharmonicon on its body.
Yeah, Vorinclex is shutting down your ability to answer it. And that itself is that's really hard. And then it's giving your opponent the big advantage in mana, which we've covered in this tier specifically, is a big deal compared to 4 and 5.
Yes. It also gets worse the more mana rocks you have. The problem is that most people at bracket 3, 3, 1, 2, and 3 don't value mana rocks enough. Right? Mm-hmm. You could shove a mana vault under their face till they're blue in the face, but they will refuse to acknowledge, just in my own personal experience, again, dozen game stores across my entire country, different regions of my country as well. They just don't understand that rocks, people who play 1, 2, and 3, because they don't have the knowledge, money, or the experience, whatever you want to say, of playing some other brackets. They just don't understand that rocks are that good, which means that Vorinclex is really good against them. They're just not allowed to do it. Here's the thing. We're taking a long time for this one, but I'm interested. Do you count Vorinclex as land denial for the purposes of what they're talking about?
I do count Vorinclex as land denial in terms of what they're talking about.
I think it's a bit disingenuous to go the other way and say that it's not. I'm actually of the opinion that I think it doesn't change where I would put it, right? Even if we were being incredibly pedantic and saying it's not land denial, it's just resource management, or we pick some other words to dance around it, right? And we say that they're slept, but they're not permanently tapped down. Would we really want precons to be fighting a Vorinclex? Yeah. Would you? No. Okay, so would you want upgrade? Would you want upgraded lists to fight a Vorinclex? No. Once again, I don't.
Also, no.
Yeah. Also, no. Actually, so 2 left, and then what we're gonna do after this, is we're gonna do a quick review over all of the things. Save it. right? Like, share it, save it, something like that. We'll kill the stream and then we'll come back. And if you're still up for it, we'll go over Aku's bracket 3 list. And then
I
we'll do a
might
lot
have
of
to leave, but it depends. I'm awake right now, so.
Okay, got you. So we got 2 more. Winota, Joiner of Forces. I don't understand this one. I will be honest.
I think we did talk about this one. I think that it can just be taken off.
I literally don't understand this.
Yeah, if you are playing Winota in tier 1, you already know what you're doing. And it's just against the philosophy of it. There's no purpose for it to be there because people see it and they know.
Yeah.
Like, they can just read the card. They don't even have to know, and they can just be like, that seems very, very strong.
Yeah, like also it's an Ikoria commander. You're not accidentally looking up Ikoria commander. I do feel like it has to be on the list, probably an exhibition, because again, it kind of has that Jin-Gitaxias feeling where
you're just the threat.
Like, you have accidentally put yourself in threat pile zone. And you might have done it on accident. Like, I'm trying to have compassion. You might have done it on accident. Maybe you haven't ever seen what a Winota or a Najeela. Like, Najeela is a bit different because you know what you're doing. If you're playing Najeela, the 5 colors scares most people, as it were, into not building it. But Winota, maybe you just genuinely were playing Feather and were like, hey man, I want another Boros commander. Here's Winota. And it's kind of a fun thing. No one is showing off anything cool with their Winota Joiner of Forces. I'll put it this way. If they made a game show where it was build an interesting Magic deck and we'll top chef it and see if you've made an interesting deck building brew, and then we'll watch from there. If someone put together Winota Joiner of Forces, that would be well, we told you to make your dish colorful and you just took some bell peppers and put them on top of the dish with 30 seconds left to go until plating. You know what you did. You know what you did wrong here.
Yeah.
Yep. So I think you just don't let it in there. I think other precons can fight a precon Winota. You could probably mess it up. Because precon specifically, Zan, is in the context of what they say here. The easiest reference point is that the average current pre-constructed deck is at a core or bracket level 2 level, right? Current precons can fight there. You can make a current precon level Winota, right? I think that's doable. You just have to resist the temptation to look at aggravated assault, right? It's more complicated than that, but anything you want to add to that? Does that sound about right?
No, I think that it's very in line with the other things that we've said about the tier 1 commanders.
Yes. And then the last one is Yuriko, the Tiger Shadow. Listen, Yuriko feels a lot like Urza in that I've never met a depowered Yuriko.
I was about to say, we can literally just put it in, you put it in the right tier the first time.
Yeah.
Yuriko, you can just put the Draco in, you can just play Temporal Trespass, you get to play a lot of very good cards.
Yeah, the ninjas are not bad.
Commander Ninjutsu.
Well, yes. Even if
also, same as what we said with Kinnan, where it's what you're doing. There's a lot of cards that are immediately going to go in your deck. It's the same for Yuriko. That lineup of very cheap creatures that are slightly evasive.
Yes.
That's just always going to be the same. Otherwise, you could probably show up and be like, hey, I'm playing Yuriko. It's just ninjas. There isn't really anything else happening. And you could show me the deck list and I'd be like, we're going to bypass these points. But it's another kind of protecting the lower tiers thing, where it's the second that somebody brings it slightly upgraded, it's just such a good deck.
I just gave a good example there. If you know what the card Invisible Stalker is, you probably cannot be trusted to build Yuriko because you'll accidentally make a really good deck, right? Again, what's funny is that the gentleman who played Urza that I was mentioning previously, obviously not saying any names, but it's not anyone I think we both know. He also had a Yuriko deck. Much the same thing. He's just following the blueprint as it's written because it's a good commander. It has a good effect, and it kind of tells you what you should be doing with it, right?
Yeah.
And CEDH,
I've played it against it a lot in CEDH, and it's a very flexible deck. There's a lot of things that you get to do with it. You can pivot so easily. That's one of the reasons that you do know who I've played against
Yes,
on
yes,
Yuriko a lot, and he's a very passionate player of that deck.
yes.
Um,
Oh, it's definitely
and
cool. I
it's
like it.
scary.
It's
Like
it's fun.
you get to change what you're doing so much.
Yes.
It's like it's very very flexible.
It's got the
Um,
Urza thing again, where there's like, no matter which way you're looking at it, even if you're like, here's a card you've probably, I don't know if you've seen before. Have you ever read the card Fallen Shinobi?
yeah.
Yeah. Like, even if you're just playing ninjas, you've got cards like Fallen Shinobi that just is, or you've got the ninja that
Mhm.
copies itself every time it hits someone. Like, what the hell, man? Like, there's no casual way to do this. There's no precon that's fighting a Yuriko, right?
Yeah.
Assuming even close to equal player skill. So I'm just gonna jam it to Yuriko. Over here to bracket 3. So we'll look at this as to end it. Unsurprising, I think we basically pre-committed to this, but not because we made like some handshake pact. It's just the way we think of the format. Nothing in the CEDH bracket or the bracket 5 ban list makes sense, because obviously that means we just want the whole thing banned. I think you mentioned a couple that might be. I think I mentioned Rhystic Study. You mentioned like, I haven't seen too much. Maybe Underworld Breach. Not sure though. Then we've got some cards like it does a nice bell curve here. Like some cards over here and optimize. The most of them we're protecting are bracket 3, because there's just some cards that are just a bit too good for you to be like lurking around bracket 3. A couple of things in core or bracket 2. A few cards, and one very surprising inclusion, I think, for some people, the Ancient Tomb in bracket 1, and then 3 cards we would remove from the Game Changers. Looks like a pretty nice bell curve. Yeah.
And they definitely did a good job picking out these cards. Like we only said that there's 3 of these that we would actually totally take off of this
of
list.
40, by the way. Of 40
Yeah,
of them.
and one of them is literally like fundamentally banned from the lower tiers because of a rule that they put in place. And I think that rule is totally, I get it. People feel bad about chaining extra turns. Even if it's at a very high cost. I totally get it.
Yep.
It's just, a lot of these cards, they are still just too good to be played at certain levels. It's just very difficult. Like, if you are in that upgraded tier, you get to play 3 Game Changers, and you can play any of those cards that we have on that list that we think should be banned in that tier. And some of them, it's like, yeah, that feels ridiculous. Like, you're not just going to put LED in,
Yes.
assuming. Well, no, you could still play LED in Underworld Breach, and Wheel of Fortune is nowhere near this list.
Yep.
So there's a lot of junk.
That's kind of the
a
whole
lot of
purpose
things
of putting this
yeah.
together, right? Is that the current system is that there's a Game Changers list, but it only really matters for don't play them in brackets 1 and 2. Do whatever you want in 4 and 5, and you're allowed 3 of them in bracket level 3. This idea, again, is more, hey, we put it into whatever bracket, and if it's in that bracket, you can't play it there or lower, just in our experience. But for instance, this would mean if somehow, again, we were the God Emperors of Mankind and we were allowed to do this, if this list were to be finalized, it would be something like, oh, hey, you see all those cards that are banned in optimized right here? Well, the downside is you can't play them in your bracket 4 deck. But the good news is that you could play every one of the cards underneath of it, right? And that's the difference between the Game Changers system as proposed by the panel, the commander panel, and what we're supposing here. So I think it's pretty interesting.
And if you want to go over like each tier that we have really quick, I want to cover some general points that I feel like we've kind of assembled with it.
Sure.
Like for optimized, it's just a lot of cards that on their own are capable of so much destruction in a game of Commander. They do the takeover, or they just put a nail in it like Drannith Magistrate, and it just feels like that's too good, period. If you are not playing on a full competitive mindset, all of those cards kind of seem like, I don't know. Because the biggest problem, like Trouble in Pairs does kind of stick out like a sore thumb among the rest of those cards.
Yes.
But also, I think the only downside of Trouble in Pairs is that it means that you're in white.
Yeah.
And, you're probably not only in white.
Yes. You're probably, if you're playing this, also in blue or black or, what would you have to say about the upgraded tier? What we've got is, if we're using the Smogon tiers, this would be underused.
Yeah, the upgraded tier is a lot of just the speed. There's a couple things where it's like a final, it's a finale for the game, where it's like, yeah, I think it's just too hard to deal with. So like the Bolas' Citadel or the Vorinclex, just too hard to deal with. Other than that, it's like, is it answerable above this tier? And is it answerable in that tier? So a lot of those things, they just don't have an answer in that tier consistently enough. So they also are going to pull that takeover. It's just that they are still kind of a step below that optimized tier. It's not going to do that much on its own. Without, how do I want to word this? It's not going to do that much on its own without the chance of still being reprimanded for doing it, like it would be in the optimized tier.
Yes.
Like Vorinclex can be answered in the optimized tier very consistently. Vorinclex is not going to be answered nearly as consistently on an upgraded precon sort of level.
Yes. What about core? This is, again, the level of a current precon, I think is what bracket 2 says.
Mm-hmm. Core, we are allowed some, speed, but at some point it's still too much to compare it to a normal precon. So, we still don't want people playing things like Moxin or anything like that. Psych Rift, still, even if it's not something that instantly wins the game, still just like too good. And then the tutors, of course, just being cards that they're boring at these low levels. They are just a placeholder card for whatever else is your best card, and that's not a healthy thing to promote, I don't believe, in those lower levels. It's also something that a lot of these cards here, when I see them, I'm like, I don't think that should be in a precon, so it makes a lot of sense that they're just crossed off from there.
Yes, even though some of them are in precons, right? We're imagining that if we had ultimate authority to say what's allowed in a bracket or below, and we were independent of all the financial ramifications of that decision, right? Then don't let that. The bottom one here, exhibition. Like, what's wrong with these, or what's the theme? Because on its face, these are some pretty good cards, right? We have
the exhibition. They're just, they shouldn't be played there.
Yeah,
and that's kind of like just the thing. Because even Ancient Tomb we talked about, where we're like, this is probably realistically, it still is such a big downside at these levels. It's just that it doesn't belong, regardless,
right.
on the basis of being, themes and a very, very relaxed way of playing the game.
Yes.
None of those cards really go there.
What about the Jin and the Winota?
Same thing. It's just not as much of a relaxed game when you sit down and you know that your opponent is the biggest threat at the table because of what they have in the command zone. Like, the first piece of revealed information is making it so that the game is morphed around them.
And then the last one are the 3 of the 40. I want to stress again that of the 40 of them, we only said 3 of them just shouldn't be on this list at all. What's the common theme for these, the removed from the game changers?
In terms of, Trinisphere is a bit unique there, because Trinisphere is the one there where I'm like, if somebody tried to make an argument for it, it would be a tough sell for me to think that Trinisphere belongs anywhere on this list. The other 2, I'm like, yeah, you can give a real argument for, Grand Arbiter being in Exhibition or something like that, or, Expropriate is just against that core rule that they found. But I think that extra turns thing is whatever. It's a theme that you can play, and it does not, win the game on its own. It's a value thing, and it's a huge value thing, but it's not concerning. It's more of that feel bad, I think. Yeah, I mean, each of those removal ones, like, there's not too much that I generally would say about the 3 of them at once. They're each kind of their own deal, So major props to them picking out these cards for this list. Do I think that there should be more cards? Totally, but we'll talk about that at a later date.
We might even start with the ban list. Wouldn't that be a spicy one to go over? The cards that are on the ban list, where we would put them in the brackets. But not right now. That might be a bit too much for right now, truthfully. Not least because I had to make this tier list, Zan. There was not already a tier list for this. So I had to take an hour or so, copy all of the images, and then make a new tier list.
It's been fun, yeah.
Yep. So there you go. I'm probably going to post this at some later point, but we're going to wrap up here. Take about a minute or so, and then Aku, I see that you're waiting in the chat. Zan, if you're still free, we can go over that bracket 3 list.
Yeah, I should have a little bit of time to look it over. So.
Okay, sounds good. All right. Thanks for the talk, and here's to hopefully a long series of these. Take care.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep. Bye.